The classroom buzzed with quiet chatter as students settled into their seats. Nexus Prime Academy was the most important school in the galaxy. Only the smartest aliens from every corner of space could study here. The walls were made of special metal that could show the stars outside, and right now they displayed the beautiful blue nebula that surrounded the station. Jiho Park sat in the back row, his head resting on his hand. His black hair fell across his eyes as he stared at his data pad. The other students knew him as the lazy human who somehow never failed any test. He had been at the academy for 3 months now, and most aliens still found him strange. Humans were new to galactic society, and everyone was curious about them. Mira Kim sat 3 rows ahead of Jiho. She was an Altarian, which meant she had pale blue skin and could read minds if she tried hard enough. Her people were known for being very smart and very careful. Right now, she was thinking about the assignment Professor Vector had given them yesterday. Daisu Choi occupied the seat next to Mira. He came from Centauri, where everyone learned to be good at talking to different alien species. His green skin had small spots that changed color when he felt strong emotions. Today, the spots were yellow, which meant he was excited about something. Hyejin Lee worked on her portable computer near the front of the room. She was from Vega, where technology was more advanced than anywhere else. Her people had silver skin that reflected light, and she always wore special glasses that could connect to any computer system. She was typing very fast, probably working on 3 different projects at once. Professor Vector entered the classroom, and all the students became quiet. He was a crystalline, which meant his body looked like it was made of living glass. When he walked, his body made soft musical sounds. He was very old and very wise, and students respected him throughout the galaxy. "Good morning, class," Professor Vector said. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Today we have a special situation. We are getting a new student." The students looked at each other with interest. New students were rare at Nexus Prime. Usually everyone started at the beginning of the year. "This student comes to us through the integration program," the professor continued. "As you know, this program helps different species learn to work together. Some species have had difficulties joining galactic society." Jiho looked up from his data pad for a moment, then went back to reading about Earth's corn production. Statistics. He found agriculture much more interesting than whatever drama the other students were excited about. "I want everyone to remember what we learned about overcoming fear responses," Professor Vector said. "Different species evolved in different ways. What seems scary to one species might be normal to another. Keep your minds open." The door to the classroom opened with a soft hiss. What walked through that door made every alien in the room forget how to breathe. It was tall, very tall. 8 feet of pure muscle and bone that looked designed for only one purpose: killing. Its skin was black as deep space, but it seemed to absorb light rather than just being dark. 4 arms ended in claws that could probably cut through metal. Its head was long and narrow, with a mouth full of teeth that went back in rows like a shark. But worse than the teeth were the eyes. They were completely black, like looking into empty space. This was a void hunter. Every alien in the classroom knew what void hunters were. They were the monsters that parents told scary stories about. They came from the edge of the galaxy, where no civilized species dared to go. They had destroyed 12 different civilizations just because they could. They hunted for fun. They killed because it made them happy. Mira Kim's psychic abilities went crazy. She could feel the terror coming from every mind in the room except one. Her hands shook as she tried to control her powers. She had never felt this much fear from so many people at once. Daisu Choi's spots turned bright red, then white, then started flashing between different colors. His people's diplomatic training had never prepared him for this. Every instinct told him to run, but his legs would not move. Hyejin Lee's fingers stopped typing. Her computer screen showed 17. Different escape route calculations, but her body would not respond to her commands. She had read about void hunters in historical databases. The descriptions did not match how terrifying the real thing was. Students throughout the room activated personal shields, reached for emergency communication devices, or simply sat frozen in pure terror. Some of the smaller species started to hyperventilate. The void hunter looked around the room with those terrible black eyes. When it spoke, its voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. "I am Crathmore," it said. "I am here to learn about other species." Professor Vectar's crystal body was vibrating at a higher frequency than normal, which meant he was nervous too. But he maintained his professional composure. "Class," he said, "please welcome our new student. Crathmore comes from the Void sector and will be studying interspecies relations with us." In the back of the room, Jiho yawned. It was not a small yawn. It was a big, loud yawn that filled the silence in the classroom. He stretched his arms above his head, looked around at all the frozen faces, and seemed confused about why everyone was so quiet. "Weird," Jiho muttered to himself, then went back to reading his data pad. Crathmore's 4 eyes focused on the human in the back row. In the Void Hunter's entire life, spanning over 200 years and countless hunts across the galaxy, no creature had ever failed to show fear in its presence. Fear was how Crathmore measured other species. Fear was how it knew where it stood in the universe. This small human showed no fear at all. Crathmore tilted its head, studying Jiho like a scientist, studying an interesting specimen. Perhaps the human was in shock. Perhaps the fear would come later. Sometimes prey froze completely before the panic set in. But Jiho just kept reading about corn production and yawning. Professor Vectar cleared his throat, which sounded like small bells ringing. "Perhaps Crathmore would like to find a seat, and we can begin today's lesson." The Void Hunter moved toward an empty seat in the middle of the room. As it walked, every student it passed leaned as far away as possible without actually falling out of their chairs. Some of them were making small, scared noises, but when Crathmore passed Jiho's row, the human glanced up and nodded politely. The way someone might acknowledge a classmate they had seen before but did not know very well. Then Jiho went back to reading about agriculture. Professor Vectar tried to continue with the lesson, but it was impossible. Half the students were still frozen in terror, and the other half were trying to quietly activate emergency protocols on their personal devices. The crystal professor's body was making higher-pitched sounds than usual, which meant he was stressed. "Class," he said, his voice trying to stay calm, "this is exactly what we discussed in our unit about xenophobic responses. Different species have evolved different survival instincts. What we are experiencing right now is a natural reaction, but we must learn to overcome it." Mira Kim was having the worst time of all. Her psychic abilities made her feel everyone else's fear along with her own. It was like being inside a room where everyone was screaming, but the screaming was happening inside her head. She kept glancing at Jiho, trying to understand how his mind could be so calm. When she tried to read his thoughts, all she found was mild curiosity about something called crop rotation schedules. Dae-Soo Choi was breathing in the special pattern his people used to stay calm during difficult diplomatic situations. His spots were still flashing different colors, but he was trying to remember his training. His species had made contact with dangerous aliens before. The key was to show respect without showing weakness. He cleared his throat and spoke in the most polite voice he could manage. "Welcome to our class, Crathmore. We are honored to learn alongside you." Crathmore turned all 4 eyes toward Dae-Soo. The Centaurian immediately regretted speaking. Those black eyes seemed to look right through him. "You smell like fear," Crathmore said in its scraping voice. but you try to hide it. This is interesting. Daisu's spots turned completely white. Hyejin Lee was frantically typing on her computer, running calculations and searching databases. She had found the official Galactic Council files on Void Hunters, and they were terrifying. Average height, 8 feet. Average weight, 400 pounds of pure muscle. Natural weapons, claws that could cut through titanium, teeth designed for tearing through armor. Speed that exceeded most vehicles. Threat level, extinction class. But there was something else in the files that confused her. Void Hunters were supposed to be extremely aggressive. They were supposed to attack anything that moved. Yet this one was sitting calmly in a classroom chair, trying to participate in a lesson about interspecies relations. Professor Vektar decided to use this situation as a teaching opportunity. I think this would be an excellent time for our cultural exchange project. I want everyone to pair up with someone from a different species and learn about their homeworld and customs. The students looked around nervously. Nobody wanted to be paired with the Void Hunter. Krathmore, the professor said. Perhaps you could work with... He looked around the room. Most students were trying to make themselves invisible. Jiho, would you mind working with our new student? Jiho looked up from his datapad. Sure, he said, like he had just been asked to help carry some books. Every other student stared at him in amazement. Mira Kim tried to scan his thoughts again, looking for any sign of the suicidal bravery that would make someone volunteer to work with a Void Hunter. All she found was mild annoyance at being interrupted from his reading. Krathmore moved to the seat next to Jiho. The human did not move away. He did not flinch. He just moved his datapad slightly to give the Void Hunter more room. So, Jiho said, "What's your homeworld like?" Krathmore had never been asked this question by potential prey before. Usually, conversations with other species involved a lot of screaming and running away. This was new. The void sector is harsh, Krathmore said slowly. The star is dying, so there is little light. The air burns the lungs of weak species. The gravity is 3 times what most worlds consider normal. Huh? Jiho said, nodding. Sounds a bit like Titan. That's one of our moons. My cousin works there in the mining stations. He says the sulfur storms are pretty bad, but you get used to it. Krathmore paused. No species had ever compared their homeworld to the void sector before. Most could not even survive the journey there. The surface is covered in acid pools, Krathmore continued, testing the human's reaction. The native predators are larger than your spacecraft. We hunt them for sport when we are children. Cool, Jiho said. Sounds a bit like Australia, but with more acid. My grandmother used to live there before the climate stabilizers were installed. She had some great stories about the wildlife. Other students were listening to this conversation with growing amazement. Hyejin Lee was recording everything on her computer. Daisu Choi's spots had stopped flashing and were now a steady purple color, which meant he was very confused. Mira Kim was getting a headache from trying to understand how Jiho's mind worked. Krathmore described the ritual hunts that young Void Hunters went on to prove they were ready for adulthood. These hunts could last for years and covered multiple star systems. The goal was to track down the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy and kill them with only natural weapons. That sounds like a really serious camping trip, Jiho said. My grandfather used to take me camping in Siberia during the nuclear winter season. We would stay out there for weeks with just basic supplies. He said it built character. Krathmore was beginning to suspect that humans might not be what they seemed. What do you mean by nuclear winter season? Oh, that's when the fallout from the atmospheric processors creates those big radiation storms, Jiho explained casually. It only lasts a few months each year, and the radiation levels aren't too bad if you know what you're doing. Great time for ice fishing, actually. The Void Hunter stared at Jiho. In the common galactic language, the words radiation storms and ice fishing did not usually appear in the same sentence. Professor Vektar announced that it was time for lunch break. Students began packing up their things, most of them still keeping a careful distance from Crathmore. "Want to eat together?" Jiho asked. "I brought some sandwiches from home." Crathmore had never been invited to share a meal by a potential victim before. "What is a sandwich?" "Food between bread," Jiho said, pulling a wrapped package from his bag. "This one has some mild spices from Earth, nothing too fancy." He unwrapped the sandwich and offered half to Crathmore. The Void Hunter looked at the strange food. Its species usually ate their prey while it was still alive and fighting. But this seemed like an important cultural exchange moment. Crathmore took a bite. The pain was immediate and intense. The mild spices felt like liquid fire in the Void Hunter's mouth. Its eyes began to water, which was something that had never happened before. The burning sensation spread down its throat and into its stomach. "Good, right?" Jiho said, taking a big bite of his own half. "My mom grows the peppers in our garden. She calls this her mild recipe because she doesn't want to scare the neighbors." Crathmore tried to maintain dignity while its mouth felt like it was being dissolved by acid. The most dangerous predator in the galaxy had just been defeated by human lunch food. Around them, other students watched in fascination as a Void Hunter learned what humans considered mild seasoning. After lunch, Professor Vectar decided to make the cultural exchange project official. He was fascinated by the interaction between Jiho and Crathmore. In 50 years of teaching, he had never seen a Void Hunter have a normal conversation with another species. "I want everyone to spend the next week learning about your partner's culture," he announced. "You will present your findings to the class next Monday. This is an opportunity to break down the barriers between species." Most students paired up quickly with members of species they already knew, but everyone kept glancing at Jiho and Crathmore, wondering how long the human would survive. Crathmore was still dealing with the burning sensation from the mild sandwich. The Void Hunter had eaten creatures that could melt steel with their blood, but human spices were apparently more dangerous than anything in its home sector. "So, tell me more about these ritual hunts," Jiho said, pulling out his data pad to take notes. "How do you track something across multiple star systems?" Crathmore was surprised by the human's genuine interest. "We follow scent trails through space. The vacuum carries chemical signatures for light years if you know how to read them. The hunt for a mature stellar worm took me 3 years to complete." "What's a stellar worm?" Jiho asked, typing notes. "A creature the size of a small moon that feeds on plasma from young stars," Crathmore explained. "They can survive in the vacuum of space and their skin can withstand the heat of a star's corona. Killing one requires patience and the ability to hunt in zero gravity for extended periods." Jiho nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like deep-sea fishing, but in space. My uncle does that on Earth." "Well, the Earth version. He hunts giant squids in the Mariana Trench. Says the pressure down there would crush most submarines, but it's peaceful once you get used to it." Crathmore was quiet for a moment. "Your uncle hunts creatures in the deep ocean?" "Yeah, it's pretty common on Earth," Jiho said. "The really big ones live way down where it's completely dark and the pressure is insane. Some of them are bigger than buildings. My uncle says the trick is to think like they do." The Void Hunter was beginning to understand that human, common activities might not be normal for other species. Across the room, Mira Kim was listening to this conversation with her psychic abilities. She had been studying human culture for her own project, and she was starting to realize some disturbing things. She opened her portable computer and began researching Earth. What she found made her feel sick. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world by the Galactic Council. Class 12 was the highest rating possible. It meant a planet so dangerous that most species could not survive there even with environmental suits. Earth's gravity was 2.7 times galactic standard. Its atmosphere contained oxygen levels that would be toxic to most life forms. The planet experienced regular natural disasters that would destroy entire civilizations. Hurricanes with winds over 200 miles per hour, earthquakes that could split continents, volcanic eruptions that could change the climate of the entire world. And humans called it home. Mira Kim shared her findings with Dae-soo Choi and Hyejin Lee through a private message channel. All three students began looking at Jiho with new understanding. "Tell me about your family's camping trips," Crathmore was saying. "Oh, those are great," Jiho replied enthusiastically. "Every summer we go somewhere new. Last year we visited the Yellowstone supervolcano region. The radiation levels were pretty high because of some recent activity, but the geysers were amazing. The year before that we went to Alaska during earthquake season. We had to rebuild our camp 3 times, but we saw some incredible aurora displays." Crathmore was taking mental notes. "Humans apparently vacationed in locations that would qualify as weapon testing sites by galactic standards." "What about winter activities?" the Void Hunter asked. "Ice climbing mostly," Jiho said. "There are some great frozen waterfalls in the Himalayas where the temperature stays around -40 degrees. The altitude makes it hard to breathe, but the views are worth it. And my little sister loves skiing in the avalanche zones. She's only 12, but she's really good at reading snow conditions." "Your 12-year-old sister participates in avalanche zones?" Crathmore asked slowly. "Yeah, all the kids do," Jiho said. "It's how you learn to react quickly to changing conditions. Plus, it's fun. Nothing like the rush of outrunning a few thousand tons of snow." Hyejin Lee was frantically taking notes on her computer. She had cross-referenced human recreational activities with galactic safety standards. According to her calculations, what humans called children's games would require emergency hazard protocols on most civilized worlds. Dae-soo Choi was having an existential crisis. His people prided themselves on being able to communicate with any species, but humans were apparently so far outside normal parameters that standard diplomatic guidelines did not apply. "What do humans do for entertainment?" Crathmore asked. Jiho brightened up. "Oh, lots of things. Sports are really popular. Football, hockey, rugby, boxing, motor racing, rock climbing, skydiving, bungee jumping, whitewater rafting." "Explain football," Crathmore said. "2 teams of really big guys try to carry a ball to opposite ends of a field," Jiho said. "The other team tries to stop them by hitting them as hard as possible. No weapons allowed, just body contact. Games can get pretty intense." "They hit each other for fun?" "Yeah, it's great exercise," Jiho said. "I played in high school, broke my nose twice, and dislocated my shoulder once, but our team won the championship." Crathmore was quiet for a long time. Void Hunters were warriors bred for combat, but they fought to survive. Humans apparently fought for entertainment. "Tell me about motor racing," the Void Hunter said. "Humans build vehicles that go really fast, then drive them around tracks to see who can go fastest without crashing," Jiho explained. "The good drivers can reach speeds over 200 miles per hour. Sometimes they crash and explode, but that's part of the excitement." "They deliberately risk death for entertainment?" "Well, not deliberately," Jiho said. "I mean, nobody wants to crash, but everyone knows it might happen. That's what makes it interesting." Professor Vectar had been listening to this conversation while helping other students. His crystal body was vibrating at frequencies that indicated deep thought. As an educator, he was beginning to understand that humans might represent something completely new in galactic civilization. "What about rock climbing?" Crathmore asked, apparently fascinated by human recreational activities. "You find a really tall cliff and climb to the top using just your hands and feet," Jiho said. "The best climbs are the ones where you can't see the bottom because of clouds. Free climbing is the most fun because you don't use safety equipment, so you have to be really careful not to fall. And if you fall, then you die," Jiho said cheerfully. "But the view from the top is amazing." Around the classroom, other students had stopped working on their own projects and were listening to this conversation. They were beginning to realize that humans might be the most terrifying species in the galaxy, not because they were violent, but because they were completely insane by normal standards. Crathmore looked at Jiho with something approaching respect. In Void Hunter culture, only the strongest and most skilled warriors survive to adulthood. But humans apparently raise their children by throwing them into deadly situations for fun. I think, Crathmore said slowly, that I would like to visit Earth someday. You should, Jiho said. Just make sure to bring a good environmental suit. The atmosphere takes some getting used to if you're not from around here. The next day, Heejin Lee arrived at class with a thick folder of research data and a worried expression. She had spent all night digging through galactic databases, and what she had found changed everything she thought she knew about humans. I need to show you something, she whispered to Mira Kim and Daesu Choi before class started. She opened her computer and displayed a series of charts and graphs. This is Earth's gravitational force compared to galactic standard, she said, pointing to a bar graph. Earth has 2.7 times normal gravity. That means Jiho is basically carrying around 2 extra copies of himself every day. Daesu Choi's spots turned pale green, which meant he was feeling sick. That's impossible. How does he walk around so easily? It gets worse, Hyejin continued. Earth's atmospheric composition is 21% oxygen. Most species consider anything over 15% to be toxic. And look at this temperature data. She showed them another chart. Earth's temperature ranges from -80 degrees to +70 degrees Celsius. That covers the entire habitability range for most known species. Humans live in all of it. Mira. Kim had been trying to scan Jiho's memories again with her psychic abilities. What she found there made her hands shake. I looked into his mind last night, she said quietly. I saw fragments of his childhood memories. Their planet has storms that can destroy cities. They have ocean creatures larger than our spacecraft, and they treat all of this as normal. She paused, looking pale. He has a memory of swimming in an ocean with creatures called great white sharks. These things are 12 feet long and have hundreds of razor-sharp teeth. He was swimming with them for fun. Daesu Choi's diplomatic training kicked in. Perhaps we should research the official galactic position on humans, he suggested. Hyejin's fingers flew across her keyboard. She accessed the Galactic Council's classified files using her advanced security clearance. What appeared on the screen made all 3 students stare in shock. Humans are classified as an emerging apex species, she read. Status, under observation. Threat level, unknown but potentially extreme. Recommended protocol, maintain diplomatic relations but avoid territorial disputes. She scrolled down to read more. Notes from the first contact team. Human representatives. Remained calm during negotiations despite being outnumbered 200 to 1 by heavily armed species. When asked about their planet's defenses, they described their military as small and their weapons as basic. Further investigation revealed that human basic weapons could sterilize most habitable planets. The 3 students looked across the room at Jiho, who was cheerfully sharing another sandwich with Crathmore. The Void Hunter was eating very carefully this time, taking tiny bites and keeping a glass of water nearby. There's more, Hyejin said. She opened another file. Environmental Assessment of Earth. Warning, Class 12 Deathworld. Extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, unstable geological activity, dangerous wildlife, unpredictable weather patterns. Recommend full environmental suits and maximum security protocols for any visiting expeditions. But humans live there, Daesu said weakly. They don't just live there, Mira Kim said, reading over Hyejin's shoulder. Look at this population report. There are over 9 billion humans on Earth. They've completely covered the planet. Meanwhile, Crathmore was having its own crisis of understanding. The Void Hunter had spent the morning asking Ji-Ho about human history, and the answers were disturbing. "Tell me about your wars," Crathmore had said. "Which ones?" Ji-Ho asked. "We've had a lot of them." "The most recent major conflict." "World War III, I guess," Ji-Ho said thoughtfully. "That was about 50 years ago, before the world government was established. Pretty much every country was involved." "How many casualties?" Crathmore asked. "About 2 billion, Ji-Ho said casually. "But we learned a lot from it. That's when we developed most of our current environmental technology, had to rebuild most of the planet afterward." Crathmore stared at him. 2 billion of your own species died, and you consider this a learning experience?" "Well, yeah," Ji-Ho said. "It was horrible, but it taught us not to do it again. We're much better at solving problems peacefully now." The Void Hunter was quiet for a moment. In its species' entire history, they had never fought a war that killed 2 billion individuals. They had never needed to. Most species surrendered after seeing a single Void Hunter. "What weapons did you use?" Crathmore asked. "Nuclear weapons mostly," Ji-Ho said. "We had to ban those after the war because they were causing too much environmental damage. These days we just use conventional explosives for mining and construction." "You use weapons for construction?" "Sure, it's the fastest way to clear mountains when you need to build new cities," Ji-Ho explained. "Much more efficient than digging by hand." Professor Vector entered the classroom and noticed that his students seemed more subdued than usual. The 3 alien students who had been researching humans looked particularly worried. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Hyejin Lee raised her hand. "Professor, we've been researching human culture for our project, and we have some questions." "Of course," Professor Vector said. "What would you like to know?" "Is it true that Earth is classified as a death world?" she asked. The professor's crystal body made a soft, chiming sound, which meant he was surprised by the question. "Where did you hear that term?" "We found it in the Galactic Council databases," Daesu Choi said, "along with some very concerning information about human capabilities." Professor Vector looked across the room at Ji-Ho, who was showing Crathmore pictures on his datapad. From what the professor could hear, Ji-Ho was explaining something called volcano surfing to the fascinated Void Hunter. "Perhaps," the professor said carefully, "this would be a good time for an open discussion about species differences. Ji-Ho, would you mind sharing some information about Earth with the class?" Ji-Ho looked up from his datapad. "Sure. What do you want to know?" Mira Kim raised her hand. "What's the most dangerous place on your planet?" Ji-Ho thought for a moment. "Probably the deep ocean," he said. "It's completely dark down there. The pressure would crush most spacecraft, and there are some really weird creatures. Giant squids, bioluminescent jellyfish, stuff that lives around underwater volcanoes." "And humans go there?" Daesu Choi asked. "Oh yeah, it's a popular research destination," Ji-Ho said. "My aunt is a marine biologist. She spends months at a time in underwater bases studying the ecosystem. Says it's peaceful once you get used to the isolation." Hyejin Lee checked her notes. "According to our research, the pressure at Earth's ocean depths would crush most species instantly." "Yeah, you need special equipment," Ji-Ho agreed, "but it's not that bad once you get the hang of it." Crathmore spoke up. "Ji-Ho has been telling me about human recreational activities. They appear to deliberately seek out dangerous situations for enjoyment." "Like what?" Professor Vector asked. "They throw themselves from great heights with only fabric to slow their fall," Crathmore said. "They climb vertical rock faces without safety equipment. They race vehicles at speeds that would be fatal if they crashed." "And they consider this normal behavior?" the professor asked. "It builds character," Ji-Ho said, repeating something his grandfather had always told him. The classroom was quiet for a moment as everyone processed this information. "Ji-Ho," Professor Vector said gently, "do you understand why other species might find human behavior unusual?" Ji-Ho looked around at his classmates, who were all staring at him with expressions ranging from fascination to terror. "Not really," he said honestly. "I mean, everyone's different, right? You guys probably do stuff that would seem weird to humans, too." Mira Kim realized that Jiho genuinely did not understand how terrifying his species appeared to the rest of the galaxy. To him, surviving on a death world was just normal life. Professor Vector made a decision that would change everything. He had been thinking about the human situation all night, and he realized that theory was not enough. The class needed to see practical evidence of what they were dealing with. "Class," he announced, "I think it's time for a practical exercise. We're going to use the emergency simulation system." The students looked at each other nervously. The emergency simulation system was usually reserved for advanced survival courses. It created holographic environments so realistic that people had been known to suffer actual injuries from simulated dangers. "Today's scenario will be a Category 5 galactic emergency," the professor continued. "Multiple environmental hazards, hostile wildlife, and no immediate rescue possibility. Your goal is simple: survive for 1 hour." Hyejin Lee's computer beeped as she received the simulation parameters. Her face went pale as she read them. "Professor, this scenario has a projected survival rate of less than 30% for most species." "That's correct," Professor Vector said, "which is why this will be an excellent test of your emergency training." The classroom walls disappeared, replaced by a hellish landscape. The simulation placed them on a volcanic world during an active eruption. The sky was dark red, filled with falling ash and chunks of molten rock. The ground beneath their feet was unstable, cracked with streams of lava. The air was thick with toxic gases that would burn the lungs of most species. In the distance, massive creatures moved through the smoke. They looked like a cross between giant lizards and armored vehicles, with glowing eyes and mouths full of plasma-dripping teeth. The alien students immediately began implementing their emergency protocols. Mira Kim used her psychic abilities to scan the area for threats and safe zones. Her training told her to find high ground away from the volcanic activity and establish a defensive perimeter. Daesu Choi began trying to establish communication with the native creatures. His diplomatic training suggested that even hostile species might be reasoned with if approached correctly. Hyejin Lee pulled out her portable computer and started calculating optimal survival strategies. She identified 17 different environmental hazards and began prioritizing responses to each one. Crathmore entered full predator mode. The Void Hunter's body changed, becoming more streamlined and deadly. Its claws extended, its muscles tensed, and it began systematically hunting the simulated threats with lethal efficiency. All of these responses were exactly what Professor Vector expected from students who had received the best survival training in the galaxy. Then he looked at Jiho. The human was standing calmly in the middle of the chaos, looking around with mild interest. He seemed completely unaffected by the toxic air, the extreme heat, or the rain of molten rock that would have killed most species instantly. "Huh," Jiho said, catching a falling chunk of volcanic glass and examining it. "This looks just like the obsidian formations in Yellowstone. Pretty cool." A massive predator emerged from the smoke, heading directly toward the group. It was the size of a small building, covered in armor plates, and had enough teeth to chew through a spacecraft. The simulation had classified it as an extinction-level threat. The alien students prepared for the worst. Mira Kim tried to use her psychic abilities to confuse the creature. Daesu Choi attempted emergency diplomatic contact. Hyejin Lee calculated their chances of survival at less than 2%. Crathmore prepared to fight, even though the creature was 3 times larger than anything the Void Hunter had ever faced. Jiho walked toward the monster. "Jiho, no!" Mira Kim shouted, but the human was already moving. He stopped about 20 feet from the creature, which had paused to stare at this tiny being that was approaching instead of running away. Jiho cupped his hands around his mouth and made a loud noise. "Hey! Get out of here!" He waved his arms above his head, making himself look bigger. The massive predator stopped advancing. It tilted its enormous head, confused by this strange behavior. "Go! On! Shoo!" Jiho shouted, clapping his hands loudly. The creature took a step backward. "Works with bears," Jiho explained to his stunned classmates. "Same principle applies to most large predators. They're usually more scared of you than you are of them." The simulated monster, apparently programmed with realistic animal behavior, decided that anything crazy enough to challenge something its size was probably not worth the trouble. It turned around and wandered away. "How did you know that would work?" Heejin Lee asked, her voice shaking. "Experience," Jiho said. "My family camps in Yellowstone every summer. Bears are pretty common there. Same basic idea applies to most big animals." Professor Vector was taking notes as fast as he could. In 60 years of running simulations, he had never seen a student scare off an extinction-level threat by being loud and waving their arms. "What about the environmental hazards?" Dae-Soo Choi asked. "The toxic air, the volcanic activity." Jiho looked around at the hellish landscape. "It's not that bad," he said. "Reminds me of the sulfur mining regions back home. The air's a bit thick, but you get used to it. And the lava flows are pretty predictable once you know what to look for." He started walking toward what looked like the safest path through the volcanic field. "The trick is to watch the ground color. Red means recent lava flow, orange means it's cooling, black means it's safe to walk on, and you want to stay upwind of the gas vents." The other students followed him, amazed. Jiho was navigating the deadly environment like he was taking a nature walk. "How do you know which plants are safe?" Mira Kim asked, pointing to some strange vegetation growing near the lava flows. Jiho examined the plants briefly. "These look similar to the sulfur moss that grows around volcanic vents on Earth," he said. "Probably safe to eat in an emergency. The purple coloring usually means high mineral content, which is good for nutrition." He picked some of the plants and offered them to the group. "Want to try some? They taste a bit like seaweed." "You're going to eat unknown alien vegetation?" Heejin Lee asked in horror. "It's not that unknown," Jiho said. "Basic survival principle. If something is growing near an energy source like volcanic activity, it's probably adapted to harsh conditions, which usually means it's nutritious and non-toxic. Plus, life tends to follow similar patterns across different worlds." He took a bite of the purple plant. Not bad. A bit salty, but definitely edible. The simulation continued for another 40 minutes. During that time, Jiho guided the group through 3 more environmental hazards, helped them find shelter during a meteor shower, and showed them how to collect clean water from volcanic steam condensation. When the simulation ended, every student except Jiho was exhausted and traumatized. They had just survived one of the most difficult scenarios in the Academy's database, and they had done it by following a human who treated the entire experience like a camping trip. Professor Vector reviewed the simulation data. According to the computer, the group had achieved a 100% survival rate, which was unprecedented for this particular scenario. "Jiho," he said, "how did you know how to handle all of those situations?" "Basic outdoor skills," Jiho replied, shrugging. "My parents always said it was important to know how to take care of yourself in the wilderness. You never know when you might get lost during a family vacation." Crathmore looked at Jiho with newfound respect. The Void Hunter had just watched a human survive a Category 5 emergency scenario by applying what he called basic outdoor skills. "What kind of places did your family vacation?" Crathmore asked. "Oh, all over," Jiho said cheerfully. "The Sahara Desert, the Amazon rainforest, the Arctic tundra, the Pacific Ring of Fire, the Australian outback, the Himalayan mountains. We like to see different environments." The alien students stared at him. According to their databases, every location Jiho had just mentioned would require emergency survival protocols for non-human species. "And this was normal family recreation for humans?" Professor Vector asked. "Sure," Jiho said. How else do you learn to adapt to different conditions? Plus, it's fun to see new places and try new things. As the class ended, the other students realized that they had fundamentally misunderstood what humans were. They weren't fearless warriors or aggressive conquerors. They were just a species that had evolved on a planet so dangerous that everything else in the galaxy seemed manageable. By comparison, the week after the simulation changed everything at Nexus Prime Academy, word had spread throughout the station about what had happened in Professor Vectar's class. Students from other programs kept finding excuses to walk past the classroom, where the humans studied, hoping to catch a glimpse of the being who had scared off an extinction-level threat by shouting at it. Jiho remained completely unaware of his newfound fame. He continued to sit in the back row, reading about Earth's agricultural statistics and occasionally sharing his lunch with Krathmore, who had developed a strange addiction to human spices despite the pain they caused. The other students had spent the week processing what they had learned. The revelation that humans were essentially walking disaster survivors had changed their entire perspective on galactic civilization. "I've been thinking," Mira Kim said during their morning break. She, Dae-Soo Choi, and Hyejin Lee had formed an unofficial research group dedicated to understanding human behavior. "Maybe we've been looking at this all wrong." "What do you mean?" Dae-Soo asked. His spots were a calm blue color now, which meant he was no longer afraid of Jiho, just deeply confused by him. "We've been trying to understand why humans aren't afraid of things that terrify us," Mira explained. "But maybe the question should be, why are we afraid of things that don't scare humans?" Hyejin Lee looked up from her computer, where she had been analyzing survival statistics from different worlds. "I think Mira's right. Look at this data. The average galactic species evolved on worlds with stable climates, predictable weather, and relatively safe environments. We developed fear responses to help us avoid the few dangerous things in our environments." She pulled up a comparison chart. "But humans evolved on a world where literally everything was trying to kill them. Their fear responses had to be much more selective, or they never would have left their caves." Across the room, Krathmore was having a similar realization. The Void Hunter had spent the week trying to understand how humans fit into the galactic ecosystem, and the answer was disturbing. "Jiho," Krathmore said, "I have been thinking about our conversation regarding human recreational activities." "Yeah," Jiho said, looking up from his datapad. "Today he was reading about potato farming techniques." "My species prides itself on being apex predators," Krathmore said slowly. "We have spent millions of years becoming the perfect hunters. We fear nothing because nothing in our environment could threaten us." "That's pretty cool," Jiho said. "It must be nice to be at the top of the food chain." "But humans are also apex predators," Krathmore continued. "Yet you do not seem to understand this about yourselves." Jiho considered this. "I guess we're pretty good at surviving stuff," he admitted. "But that's just normal, right? Everyone has to deal with their environment." "No," Krathmore said firmly. "It is not normal. Most species in this galaxy evolved in environments that would be considered paradise worlds by human standards. Stable weather, gentle gravity, safe water, predictable seasons." "Sounds boring," Jiho said honestly. Professor Vectar had been listening to this conversation while grading papers. He had spent the week reviewing every piece of data the Galactic Council had collected about humans, and the picture that emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. "Class," he said, calling everyone to attention. "I think it's time we had an honest discussion about what we've learned this week." The students gathered around, including several from other classes who had heard about the human situation and wanted to learn more. "Jiho," the professor said, "would you mind if we discussed some of the unique aspects of human culture and biology?" "Sure," Jiho said, "though I don't know how unique we are. We're just people, you know?" Professor Vectar activated his holographic display system. "Let me show you some comparative data." The first image showed a chart comparing planetary gravity levels. Earth's gravity was marked in red, far above the galactic average. Most species in the galaxy evolved under gravity that ranges from 0.3 to 1.2 times galactic standard, the professor explained. Earth's gravity is 2.7 times standard. This means that Jiho is essentially carrying around 2 additional copies of his body weight at all times. Jiho looked down at himself. Huh, I never thought about it that way. The next chart showed atmospheric composition. Earth's oxygen levels would be toxic to 78% of known species, Professor Vector continued. The remaining 22% could survive for short periods with protective equipment. What do other planets breathe? Jiho asked curiously. Most atmospheric compositions are much more dilute, Heejin Lee explained. Lower oxygen content, higher nitrogen, trace gases that help regulate temperature and pressure. Earth's atmosphere is basically a slow-burning explosive, Daesu Choi added. One spark in the wrong place could ignite your entire planet. That's actually happened a few times, Jiho said thoughtfully. We had some pretty big fires in Australia a while back, but we figured out how to manage them. The alien students stared at him. Managing planet-wide fires was apparently another thing humans considered routine. Professor Vector showed them the temperature comparison chart. Earth's temperature ranges cover the entire habitability spectrum for most known life forms. Humans live comfortably in temperatures that would instantly kill most galactic citizens. And these are your normal living conditions? Krathmore asked. Yeah, pretty much, Jiho said. Though some places are a bit extreme, like Antarctica or the Sahara. Those take some getting used to. Jiho, Mira Kim said gently, I think you need to understand something. What you call a bit extreme would require emergency evacuation protocols for most species. But you guys must have some tough environments on your worlds too, Jiho said. Daesu Choi shook his head. The most extreme environment on my homeworld is a desert region where the temperature reaches 35 degrees Celsius and the humidity drops to 30%. We consider it uninhabitable. That sounds like a nice spring day, Jiho said. Maybe a bit dry. Professor. Vector showed them the final piece of data, a comparison of natural disasters. Most planets in the galaxy experience minor weather variations, occasional geological activity, and rare asteroid impacts. Earth experiences hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, blizzards, droughts, floods, and solar radiation events on a regular basis. Not all at the same time, Jiho protested, and we have early warning systems now. Plus, some of them are actually pretty cool to watch if you're somewhere safe. You watch natural disasters for entertainment? Heijin Lee asked weakly. Storm chasing is a popular hobby, Jiho confirmed. My dad used to take me tornado watching when I was little. Great way to learn about meteorology. The classroom was quiet for a moment as everyone processed this information. So what you're telling me, Jiho said slowly, is that Earth is more dangerous than most planets? Earth is more dangerous than 99.7% of inhabited worlds in the galaxy, Professor Vector said. It is classified as uninhabitable by standard galactic metrics. But we live there, Jiho pointed out. Yes, Krathmore said. And that is what makes humans terrifying. You have taken a world that would kill most species and turned it into a thriving civilization. You have made the impossible look routine. Jiho thought about this for a moment. I guess when you put it that way, we are pretty tough. Not tough, Mira Kim corrected. Impossible. By all reasonable standards, humans should not exist. Your planet should have killed your species long before you developed intelligence. Instead, you became stronger. And now you travel the galaxy, treating everything like a mild inconvenience, Daesu Choi added. Do you understand why that might be unsettling for other species? Jiho looked around at his classmates, finally beginning to understand why they had all been so nervous around him. I'm not scary, he said. I'm just a student studying agriculture. You're a member of a species that considers volcanic environments suitable for family vacations, Heejin Lee pointed out. That's terrifying in its own way. Crathmore spoke up. In my culture, we respect strength above all else. I have spent this week learning that humans possess a form of strength my species never imagined. The strength to make the impossible seem ordinary. Professor Vector nodded. The Galactic Council has been observing humanity for 50 years, trying to understand how to integrate your species into galactic civilization. I think this week has provided some valuable insights. Like what? Jiho asked. Like the fact that humans don't need to be feared, the professor said. You need to be understood. Your species represents something entirely new in the galaxy. Apex survivors who have turned survival into an art form. So what happens now? Mira Kim asked. Now we learn, Professor Vector said. We study human resilience and adaptation. We understand that what seems impossible to us is merely Tuesday for humans. And perhaps most importantly, we appreciate that the galaxy has become a much more interesting place with humans in it. Jiho smiled. Does this mean I can stop pretending corn production statistics are exciting? Please do, Crathmore said. I would much rather hear about your family's volcano surfing expeditions. As the class ended, the students realized that they had learned something important about the nature of survival, adaptation, and the incredible diversity of life in the galaxy. And Jiho learned that being normal was apparently the most extraordinary thing about humans.